To move to the next question, and the question says that add two promises. So promises is one of the most important, interesting, and sometimes you don't have understood it right, it falls under the category of the tough questions, and that's why it's also the interviewer's favorite. I'm assuming that you have a good grasp of promise, but this question will try to understand a little bit about the promise itself. And if not, then I'm planning to anyway bring a detailed, community driven, fully interview ready series on JavaScript. So there I'll be talking about the promises again in detail. So now let's try to focus on this question, which is promises. It says that given that there are two promises, promise 1 and there's another promise called promise 2. These two promises has to combine and it has to go and return another promise called as the third promise, add two promises. So this is a function. Promise 1 and promise 2 goes in, and then promise 1, promise 2 has to be combined to create a third promise which has to be returned. Right? Promise 1 and promise 2 will both resolve with a number. The return promise should resolve with the sum of the two numbers. Okay. For example, if I try to see the example, it is trying to say that promise 1 is something which resolves to the value 2 after 20 seconds. The promise 2 will get me a value 5 after 60 seconds. And then finally, my promise will return the sum of these two values, which is 2 plus 5. That value should be equals to 7. Let's try to write this. Simple. Now let's try to go and write the code to do this. So now I already have this code section already written. What I need to do is that I need to go and wait for the promise 1 and promise 2 to resolve. How do I do it? I do it with the keyword called as await. Since async is already here outside, right, in the world of JavaScript, if we want that JavaScript should execute line by line and it should behave like a blocking programming language like Java, I should use a code called as a await. So I'll go and wait for this value. I go and set that const num1 and I go and call it as await promise 1. Fair enough. And then I go and set that a const num2 equals to await and I go and call it as promise 2. And after I have got number 1 and number 2, I should go and return these two values. So I should go and return num1 plus num2. Fair enough. Let's try to run and see if it works. It's working fine. And if I go and click on the submit, it should get submitted. Right. Let's try to solve this by some another way also. But there are multiple promises and you would like all the promises to be done and then apply the thing. There's another way to write the same code itself. So let me go and comment this code and see that how we can do with the help of another approach, which is the call as promise all approach. What we do here is I can just go and say that const and I can call it as num1 num2 equals to await and I can call it as promise dot all, and inside this I go and pass this two arguments, which is promise 1 comma promise 2. And then what I go and do, I go and return num1 plus num2. Let's try to see if that works. It's working again. If I go and submit this, this approach should also work perfectly. Now since this has worked, let's try to move to the next question and see what is that. Given a positive integer, okay, I have been given a positive integer called as millis. Write an asynchronous function that sleeps for this many milliseconds and it can resolve any value. Right, it can resolve any value. So let's try to understand with the help of an example here. So I have been given this 100 milliseconds, right? So let's say that if this is the code, I go and sleep for 100 milliseconds, and after 100 milliseconds, this should print how much? It should go and print me the 100 itself. If I go and call it 200, it should go and print me the 200 itself. Right? So the idea is inside this function, I have to add a logic so that it returns a promise. and after that time it should go and execute it. Let's try to write the code and quickly complete this. It looks pretty straight. So what I go and do here is that I can go and call it here as await, and I'll go to that new promise, and I go and pass here resolve, and I go and say that set timeout resolve in these. But what I go and say the await new promise resolve set timeout resolve release. Let's try to run this and see if it works. Perfect, I got it running. If I go and submit this, this code has worked perfectly, right? Awesome. Now let's try to move to the next question and see what the next challenge is. It's again the timeout cancellation. So all these problems are for the async JavaScript, inbuilt functions of the JavaScript, which helps you do the asynchronous processing. Right now, we go and talk about the timeout cancellation. So if I look into the function right now, let's say that given a function fn, okay, I have been given a function fn, an array of the arguments args, and a timeout t in the milliseconds. Right? If you can see that this is a function called as a cancelable. It has three arguments. The first one is the function. The second one is an array. This is an array. And t is the timeout. Fair enough. This is my timeout. After delay of the cancel time millisecond, the return cancel function will be invoked. What is trying to say that there will be some cancel time. This will be some internally fixed time. The return cancel function will be invoked. Right after the cancel time, this cancel function will be invoked. Initially, the execution of the function should be delayed by t milliseconds. Okay, this function which you see has to be delayed by t milliseconds. If before the delay of t millisecond, the function cancel function is invoked, it should cancel the delayed execution of fn. It means that let's say that function fn has to be executed after 100 milliseconds. And before 100 milliseconds, at 50 millisecond itself, this cancel function is invoked. Then my function fn should not be executed at all. However, if the cancel function is executed beyond 100 milliseconds, this function will be executed. Let's try to understand with the help of the example what they're trying to say. Little confusing terms it has, but let's try to understand with the help of an example. So the example says that let's say that function is this. This is the argument and this is the time in the millisecond after which this function has to be executed. And in this case, let's assume that the cancel time is 50 milliseconds, right? So the cancellation time is at the 50 milliseconds and the execution time is the 20 milliseconds. It means that before even the cancellation could happen, this will get executed, and if it gets executed, the output should be what? X value is to 2 into 5, 10. So the 10 is getting returned. Very nice. Cool. Now let's take the another example which is there down. This example say that again now the function is x to the power 2, argument is again 2, and the time is 100. Right? The wait time is 100 and then cancel time is 50 millisecond itself. Now here the cancel time is less than the execution time, so it will happen before. So nothing should happen, right? So it should not go and return. It should not return anything. So as you can see here, the output is empty. Fair. Now if I take the third example, here let's say that the function is that I go and multiply these two, and then I have two arguments, 2 and the 4. Correct. Now again t is 30 and the cancel time is 100. Execution time is before 30, so these two will get multiplied and the answer will be the 8 which comes up. Fair enough, we have understood. So now based on this, let's try to solve this problem. So here what I will have to do is that inside this, let me go and call it as const time over equals to set time out, and I go and pass here fn, and I go and pass here this arguments, and then I go and pass this t. I'm trying to say here that after t millisecond which has to be passed, this function has to be executed. Okay, and what I need to do is that I need to also go and say that before that the cancellation happens, right? So if I go and say that const and I go and say that cancel fn is equals to, I go and say the clear time out and I go and say the time over. I should go and return cancel function, right? So I have written the time over, I have got the cancel function, and then I go and return it. Fair enough. Seems easy. Now let's try to go and click on the run button. All fine. Let me go and click on the submit and see if this answer is accepted by the LeetCode. Awesome. The answer has been accepted by the LeetCode. Now let's try to solve another problem which is called as the interval cancellation, right? What is interval cancellation? It says that given a function fn, okay, an array of arguments args and interval time t. So this is the function which is given, right? Function is the first argument, args is a array of arguments and the interval time t. Return a cancel function, cancel fn. So this returns a function. This should return a cancel function. Fair enough. After delay of cancel time ms, the return cancel function cancel fn will be invoked. Okay. Set timeout cancel fn cancel time ms. The function fn should be called with args immediately. So as soon as I go and call this function should be called with args immediately and then called again every t milliseconds until cancel function is called as the cancel time milliseconds. Okay, let's try to understand this with the help of an example. So it is trying to say that, let's say that if I have a function fx and this is the argument 4, right, and this is the time equals to 35. So in the very beginning the 4 plus 2 8 should be printed, then after another 35 seconds it should printed, then 70 seconds should, so keep on doing this, right? And let's say that my cancel time which is there, right, the cancel time here is 190. So after 175 the next one ideally should be around how much? It should be 210, right? But before that itself the cancel happens, so nothing happens after 175 milliseconds. Fair enough. Cool. Let's take another example to understand this better. So if I see here example 2, I have this function x1 x2 and multiplies t equal to 30. So at the very beginning 2 into 5 10 it gets printed, then after 30, then after 60, then after 90, then 20, 150 it stops. It stops at 150 because at 165 the cancel time millisecond has come out. So now with this it looks very simple, straightforward code. Let's try to go and write the code to fix this. So what I do here is, let me go and write here as let me go and immediately call this function first of all without any wait. So I go and call it as function and I go and pass here args whatever that hasn't passed. After that I should go and say that const time over and I go and call it as set interval and then I go and say that function and I go and set path args and then I should go and pass this time t. Okay. After doing this I should go into the const cancel function and that should be equals to clear interval and then I can go and pass the time over. And I have to return the cancel function, so I go and call it as return cancel function. So now if I go and run this, where is that? That has to be 3 dots. I'm purposefully not editing it out because doing errors is very normal. I just want you guys to accept this and that's why I'm not editing it out. After making this, all my 3 cases have passed. We're going to submit this. Let's see that if it works. And I'm able to successfully solve this problem and my solution has been accepted. Let's move to the next problem statement. Now let's try to move to this next question, which is promise time limit. What does the problem say? The problem says that, sir, here that given an asynchronous function fn and a time t in milliseconds, return a new time limited version of the input function. Fn takes arguments provided to the time limited function. For example, this is the function, time limit function, in which you have been passed an fn and you have been passed ft. Now this fn is a time limited function, right? Fn is a time limited function typically, right? So I have to go and this what I'm returning is a time limited function. If it gets executed before t, then I should go and return resolve. Typically resolve part of the promise should be executed, and if not, then reject part of the promise, time limit exceeded should come up. Let's try to understand with the help of an example. So let's say that this is the function, this is the input function which has been passed, right? In which I'm trying to resolve, right? So here the input time is 50, and for the function to execute it will take after 100 milliseconds. Input time that has been passed is 50 milliseconds. So it takes more time to execute. So in that case, it should get a message time limit exceeded. Fair enough. Cool. Let's take another example. Another example. Let's go scroll down. I have another function called this async. Now it takes 100 milliseconds to execute. Fair enough. And what is my time that is available to me? It's 150 milliseconds. In that case, it will successfully execute, and we multiply 5 and 5, so will return 25, and it's resolved. Let's try to go and write this code here then. So what we do now here is inside this code base, I'll have to go and write const on success. We have to define something on success function fn, and I'm going to pass this args, which is available here, and I'm going to say const time out promise equals to new promise, and then I go and pass here resolve, reject, set timeout, and then I go and pass here as reject, the time limit exceeded, and this should be the t time. Fair enough. And then I should go and do the return promise dot race, and then I go and pass on success, comma timeout promise. So what I'm trying to do here is that if you see in the code here, typically I'm trying to go and say that on the success you execute this, and then I go and find out the timeout promise, which is this, and now I'm trying to say that whatever that happens first, either timeout promise or the on success, that has to be executed, right? Let's try to run and see the code if it works fine. So let me go and click on this run. All my cases are passing. Let's go and click on the submit and see if my solution is being accepted. It's taking some time. Maybe the LeetCode server is a little down right now. It's a little slow. It's loading. Hopefully the solution will be accepted. So the solution has been accepted, right? Let's try to move to the next question now. Let's try to solve this problem. This seems very interesting. Cache with time limit, right? So here is the cache with the time limit. Okay, what is trying to say? Write a class that allows getting and setting key value pairs. Okay, cache basically stores data in a form of a tuple key value pair. So you have to write a class that allows getting and setting key value pairs. Perfectly fine. However, a time limit until expiration is associated with the each key. So every time you go and insert any key value pair, you have to also go and associate a timeout to it. So till that timeout, that key value pair will exist. Post that value should not present in the cache. This is what I understand it should be, right? The class has three public methods. Set method, as you can see that inside the set, I have the key, I have the value, and I also have the duration. Key is an integer, value is an integer, and duration is in milliseconds. Fair enough. Once the duration has elapsed, the key should be inaccessible. The method should return true if the same unexpired key already exists. Whenever I'm trying to get it, it should return true, and false if it doesn't. Okay, both the value and duration should be overwritten if the key already exists. That's the set value. Then there's a get key. If an unexpired key exists, to return the associated value. Otherwise, to go and return -1. And count should return the count of an unexpired keys. Fair enough. Let's try to see with the help of an example what it's trying to say. So actions are the time limited cache. Then I'm setting. Then I'm getting. Then I'm counting. Then I'm getting, right. Values are empty array, this value, this value, this value. Time delay is 0, 0, 50, 50, 51, 50. Output is null, false, 42, 1, -1. Okay. So at t equals to 0, right, the cache is constructed. Fair enough. So it is returning null. At t equals to 0, a key value pair. This is the key, this is the value, and this is the time is added with the time limit of 100 milliseconds. The value does not exist, so the false is returned. Okay, the value does not exist, so the false is returned because 1 is a fair enough. At t equal to 50, key is equal to 1 is requested. Here I am saying at t equals to 50. Here at t 50 key is equal to 1 is requested, and the value of 42 is returned. Right, at key is 50, the value of get, and it should go and return me the 40. Fair enough. Then again t equals 50, count is called, and there is no one active key in the cache, so it should go and return 1. At t equals to because the expiration was 100, at t equals to 100, this key 142 will get expired. At t is equal to 150, get 1 is called but returns -1 is returned because the cache was empty. Fair enough. I think this looks cool. Let's see the another example again. Let's get started with the code itself. So what we do now is let's get started with the code here. So I have this time limited cache function. Here I go and define this dot cache equals to this object, and inside this function I can go and say that let result equals to false. I'm trying to go and set the set function, and I go and say that if this dot cache dot has own property, and I go and pass here as key, then I go and say the result is equals to true, and I go and say the clear timeout dash dot cache key dot timer. Then I'm going to the let ref is equals to this, and let timer id equals to set timeout, and after that timeout I have to remove that key, right? So I go and go with that delete ref dot cache key after what? After this duration. And then I go and add this dot cache key is equals to value timer equals to timer id. And what I go and do that, I should go and return result. So what I'm trying to do in this set is that first of all I go and set the result is equals to false. Then I go and check if this key is present in this cache JavaScript object. If it is present, I go and set the result is equals to true, and I go and clear this cache after this timer. Okay, I go and say clear timeout, this is the cache timer. If does not have, then I go and do a reference this, then I go and set a timer ID, and then I go and set that this dot cache key is equal to value timer equals to timer ID. Fair enough. And then I go and return the results. Cool. This is how it works. Now similarly, let's go and write the code under the getwala. Getwala is pretty much simple. So here what I go and do this, if this dot cache dot has own property is not present, then in that case I should go and return -1, else I should go and return this dot cache, and I go and pass key dot val, this dot cache key dot val. Similarly for the count it is pretty simple, and this here I'll have to go and return as return object dot keys, and then let's try to record this return object dot keys, and here I go and pass this dot cache, and then I go and pass lth length. Fair enough. So I have written this method called to set it, I have written the method to get it, I have written the method to get the count of the keys, and then I have added this cache object inside this function definition. Let's try to run this and see if this works all well. There is some error. Let's try to see that. What is that? Okay, I had done a typo. So the result should be the false. Purposefully I'm not gonna edit it out in my editing. I'll make sure that it's showing as it is. Perfectly fine. If I go and click on the submit, let's see that if my solution is being accepted. Okay, it got accepted. Now let's try to solve another important and this looks very interesting problem. This is called as a debounce problem, right? Debounce problem. So what this debounce problem says that given a function fn and a time in the millisecond t, return a debounced version of that function. So let's say that this is a function which is having passed a function and t, and this should return the debounced version of the function. A debounced function is a function whose execution is delayed by t milliseconds. A debounced function is a function whose execution is delayed by t milliseconds and whose execution is cancelled if it is called again within that window of time. The debounce function should also receive the passed parameters. Let's try to understand this with the help of an example. Let's say that the time is 50 milliseconds by which the function has to be delayed, right? So let's say that the first function was called at the first function is called here at 30 milliseconds. The time is so till 80 millisecond no function should have been called, but because since I again called the function 6 millisecond, I should not go and this will not get executed. Now again it is 60 millisecond, then for the another till 110 millisecond, no function should have been called, but I called at 100 milliseconds, so again this function does not get executed. And then finally the one function which was called at 100 milliseconds, this will get executed at 150 milliseconds. Fair enough? Am I clear? Does it make sense? Cool. Let's try to understand with the help of one more example. Let's say that if the time is t is equals to 35 millisecond. So the first function was called at 30 millisecond, right? So the next function should not be called till 65 milliseconds. Since it was called at 60 milliseconds, so this does not get executed. Now since it is 60 milliseconds, the next function should not be called till the 95 milliseconds. Now the next function was called at 100 milliseconds, so this gets executed, and then this one gets executed as 135 milliseconds. So I have to go and execute, write the code here in this function so that this functionality is maintained. Now, since we are clear to the function now, what the logic that has to be written, this looks more feasible to do it. Let's do it now. So I have to write the logic here inside this function, right? So first of all, define me a variable. Let me go and call let timer ID, and that initially is undefined in the beginning itself. And then inside this function, I go and say that clear timeout, and I go and pass this timer ID, and then timer ID is equals to set timeout. In this, I go and pass this function. I go and pass the time, and then I go and pass this. Let's try to run this and see if it works. There has to be one more dot. I have been just doing this mistake again and again as a typo. If I go and run this, seems the LeetCode has got a little slower. It will not let us finish this quick. Now my test has got passed. If I go and click on the submit, it has accepted our solution. Fair enough. Again, if you try to just see that, what we have done here is that in this question, what we did, we first of all defined a timer ID. Then inside this inner function which we are returning back, right, we are setting the clear timeout, right? And then we are calling this setTimeout function with this function which has been passed after the time t, and this args. And this I'm setting as the timer ID. So every second time when it is, if this is less, then this will just go and clear out the execution of that function. That function will not get executed. And so with this, I believe you guys have good understanding of the asynchronous JavaScript, the functions like clear timeout, set interval. We have done enough problems.